the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things. Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast. I'm your host, Allison Nissen, and today I am lucky enough to have with me Marc Ritorto. Marc, why don't you give us a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
Everybody, my name is Marc Ritorto. I'm from New Jersey, and I am an author, and the books that I generally write are usually action suspense novels. I also write fantasy vampire novels. I have two books. The first one is called The Cabal, The Saga Begins, which is kind of like Jason Bourne type book, a lot of action and suspense. And then the second book is Marcus the Vampire, which is my latest book. It's got a very unique story. Takes place where the Marcus, the main character, is in prison during a Nazi training camp, and then he gets out, and then his whole sole purpose in life is to protect his daughter from the rest of the Nazis and other creatures from the dark world, including vampires, witches, and werewolves. And I also have my own podcast as well, focused on the sport of mixed martial arts. It's called Marc the Shark MMA Show.
Are you able to bring in your martial arts background or your MMA? It's mixed martial arts, right? That's
yes.
Different than just martial arts. So are you able to bring in, is that what you're bringing in with your background in order to create suspense and tension within the novels?
Well, it's quite interesting, particularly with my first book called The Cabal, The Saga Begins. All the male, there's female characters in the book as well, but they're mostly love interest. But they do help out in solving the murder of the main character's friend and discovery of this secret society called the Cabal. But the main character, male characters in there, all have martial arts backgrounds. There's a Japanese character, Rukanaka. He's a ninja. Then there's an FBI agent, Mark Lafino, mixed martial artist before he got into the FBI. And then the other character, John Esposito, who is a amateur boxer. So yes, I do take elements of the martial arts and put it in my books, particularly with that one because it was my first one. And it originally started out with the idea of being just a story about the martial arts, but then I changed it over to be more of a murder mystery action suspense novel.
Marc, what motivated you to write your first book?
Actually, my daughter did. She was 10 years old at the time. She was really into writing. One day I was just seeing her typing something on the computer. I'm like, what are you doing there? And she's like, I'm writing a story. Have you ever thought about publishing your book? And she's like, I could do that? I'm like, yeah, why not? Because then I found out about self-publishing through Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I did my research. And after I helped her with the process of publishing her book, I'm like, I kind of remembered that I had written a story about 10 years ago, which was The Cabal. I just never finished it. So I went ahead and finished it up and I published it. Probably like 7 months after she published hers, I would say. And then I went on from there onto my second book because I'm like, I wanted to write something. Both my books there was something going on in my life, and I just had to get the story out. The second book, I always wanted to write something about vampires, and I always liked vampire movies and stuff. And but I wanted to have a little twist. So for me, I was going through changes in my life because I couldn't. At the time, I was injured, so I couldn't continue on with my martial arts training. So I poured all my interests into writing that one book, and I just kind of paralleled it. For me, it was the loss of martial arts. For the character, it was the loss of what he considers the norm, and as well as his family being in prison in a Nazi camp. He lost a lot of things, friends, family. So that's how I kind of got into it.
You were able to take your own strife and pour it into your novels, which is such a common thing for writers to do. So it's such a cathartic moment when you can do that. Was it super beneficial?
I think it did. Especially the second book, because it took my mind off what I couldn't do. You know, so it helped me take my mind and away from it. Then I just dove into the story, and it's kind of like, instead of like, when you read a book, if it's a good book, it takes your mind off things, it takes you to places where you normally can't be, especially if it's like a science fiction book or fantasy novel. I guess writing kind of does the same thing, but it's coming from your head. So yeah, I thought it was very therapeutic for me. So.
And Nazi Germany, vampires and werewolves and prison camps. What a combination. How did you come up with that idea?
Well, originally I was doing research, and I found out that so I wanted to write something that had some historical content to it. And I was like, I knew from, reading before, that the Nazis do a lot of experimentation on the prisoners. And I'm like, why not tie that into a vampire story? And then I also, when I was thinking of the idea, that I knew that the Nazis imprisoned an ethnic group called Romanis, which are, we call them gypsies, but they call themselves Romanis. That's their ethnicity. And a lot of them were killed and tortured during the time of World War II. So I was like, gypsies are always involved with occult films such as werewolves and vampires. So I thought it was a good idea. I still think it's a good idea to put the character, make that his ethnic background, and then put it back into World War II. Plus, it also leaves me time to continue the story on, because the story is really more about him, not so much about him, but him and his daughter and what he does to protect his daughter, and the friendships he makes along the way. And I figured if I start the story back then, I can continue it into the future, which is what I'm going to be doing when I write the second version of that book. Right now, I'm working on my the sequel to the Cabal. Been slacking on it, but because it's going to be really wacky. But anyway, so that's how I came up with the idea. I wanted something that had some historical content. A lot of characters in the book actually did exist, particularly from the Nazi side, and then mix it with a character that I knew that the Nazis would eventually try to torture them and kill a lot of them. So I just thought it was a great idea. Gypsies were part of the vampire werewolf movies all the time, so I just thought it was a perfect fit. Sometimes my ideas, I don't know where I come up with them, but I was like, yeah, that would make a good idea.
It does actually make a really good idea. It's logical, believe it or not. And I was just listening to an audiobook, and they were talking about the experiments that the Germans did during World War II on their prisoners. So right there, I'm like, I totally get where you're going with all of this. And I could see, they create, I haven't read the book, but I imagine that the Nazis were able to create the vampires. Is that what happened?
Well, there's two parts. They were trying to create a super soldier, and he was experimented on for that. But he becomes a vampire because of his gypsy heritage. His grandmother happens to be a witch. So she put, not a curse, but she put a spell on him since he was a baby, that no harm could ever come to him. So there's a scene in the book that he gets killed, or so they think, but he can't get killed because then he becomes a vampire. But not like other vampires, he doesn't have any of their weaknesses. He can walk during the day and everything like that, and he can absorb and mature his powers. Whereas not every vampire has powers in the book. Maybe they have one or two, and then they become what's called tribe leaders. But since he has he can pick up more powers, because not only was he felled by his grandmother, but because of the experimentation done on him. Now there was some experimentation with vampires in the book, so that the other Nazi general in the book becomes a vampire because there was a serum in the lab, but he won't have the same powers that Marcus the vampire has, because he was more created by magic than by experimentation. But the experiments made him stronger than the average vampire. Pretty unique, right?
So I've got to ask, because the character's name just begs the question: Are you the protagonist?
Yeah. In all my books, I always tell my kids and my wife, every single book, there's always going to be a Mark in it. Because Mark Ruffino in the Cabal, he's not he's one of the main characters, but he's not the only main character. And then this one is Marcus the Vampire. I like my name is Mark with a C. And then like when I was a kid, if my mother would call me Marcus. If she was mad at me, she would call me Marcos. But Marcus would be like the happy. That's why I know she was happy with me. So I'm like, this can't call Mark the Vampire. This doesn't go. It's like Marcus. It sounds more, I guess, ethnic type. I guess for James.
Yeah, it's got a ring to it. I like it. Marcus the Vampire. Yeah. My dad always called me Al. And I had friends in high school who started calling me Allie, and friends in college that would call me Allie. And I wrote it on my paper one time, and a teacher called me out and said, Allie. And at that point, I was like Allison from then on. I did not want to be, I didn't want like an adult, like an authority figure to call me Allie. It didn't sit well with me. And so I stuck with, my dad can call me Al. The people that called me Allie are safe because that's what they knew me as. But nobody else. So, but that's great. I like that story. That's a lot of fun. And I like the idea that you're always going to have a Mark of some variation in your stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and in the sequel for the Cabal, it's the same characters, but the main character focus is on Mark. But yeah.
And he has all your MMA moves and all that.
Yeah. And Cabal he does. The vampire one is more powers.
So
turning people people up with his mind, and yeah, he could do a lot. He could look at you and burn you up. So.
Those things you imagine doing, like when you're in traffic, like to the person that's tailgating you, you're like,
yeah.
I got these superpowers.
Yeah, it's kind of like the X-Men movie, like. And he's all, like where he's got Charles Xavier's powers, where he can do things with his mind. Oh yeah.
I love that. That's too funny. That's too funny. Tell me about your writing day. When you have a writing day, a day that you're going to be like, okay, I'm sitting down today, and I'm going to be productive. What is that day type? What does it look like for you?
Well, for this one, I like the new one, the new book I've been slacking on. So I'm gonna start with that one. Usually what I would do is I try to do it first thing and get up, like on a weekend. And be like, because if I don't, then something else will happen. My wife will tell me to do something, or I gotta do something with the kids. So now it should be. You would think it'll be a little easier with the lockdown, right? But because you're just staying inside. But there's a lot of stuff to do. Usually I just sit down. Lately, it's just been 30-minute clips, and I just look at my outline, Google Docs, and I look at the draft that I'm working on, and I try to see where I am. I read back the last point I wrote, and then I just start writing. And then the outline has, how can I say this? I don't know if it's true for other authors. Your outline is it's not detailed. It's just like tidbits of ideas, I'll say chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. But then but that doesn't fill up, 200, 300, 400 pages. I just sit, I start writing, and then I have no clue what I'm going to write. It just comes out. I don't even know. It's the strangest thing. I don't know if other writers have that idea.
Yes.
Sometimes I wish I could write when the idea comes to me. But it's, I guess, because, I'm not a full-time author. I don't have that luxury. So it's like, I got to write, all right, this Sunday, like, I'm going to probably do that this Sunday. I'll be like, all right, this Sunday I'm going to write. And then, try to put a half hour. I know I've heard some people say they get up. I belong to a website with other authors. And I remember this one lady said she would get up 2 hours every day before work. I don't even think she's published a book yet. She's got like 7 books written. I'm like, what are you waiting for? But yeah, I But I'm like that with everything else I do. It's like I'm very time budgeted oriented. Like, all right, X amount for work, and then after work, X amount time with the kids, and then X amount with my piano practice or my guitar practice, and then X amount for my podcast, X amount for promoting the podcast, X amount for my YouTubes, and then X amount for my writings. But when I sit down and write, the words just come out. I just have the outline, but that only fills up like a sentence. Not even. It's like a broken sentence, like 3 words. This scene. I guess I kind of write more like a movie guy. I guess draft the scene, and then it just comes out. I'm like, damn, that's pretty good. But no, I really don't know how I come up with the words to put on the page. It just comes to me. And then
you are called a pantser.
Is that what that's called?
That's called a pantser. Someone who writes by the seat of their pants. So there's plotters and there's pantsers. So you start as a plotter, but you fall squarely into the category of the pantser, the one who just says, I don't know what's going to come out of my fingertips, but something's going to end up on the page. And I understand your daughter writes as well. Yeah,
she just turned 12 the other day, on Tuesday. She's written 3 books. Our first book was like a short story about a girl who, she was 10, who was suffering from cancer and somehow miraculously beats it, and she deals with bullies in school. So I would suggest, like, if any parents got like a young child, like 8 or 7, that would be a good book. It's not sad or depressing. It's actually kind of inspiring, because how the character is strong enough to deal with the deal of having cancer and dealing with bullies, and then she wins them over in the end. But then her next 2 books, first one's called Invisible Girl, the second one's called A Little Bit Louder. It's the same character, and it's a series book called Invisible Girl series, and it's about a young girl. I guess it was about the same age as her when she wrote that one. She was about 11, and how she interacts with students in her classroom, and how she was shy, and then as time goes on, she gets a little bit more confident on herself. So that's been doing pretty good. She's been slacking on writing too. I know she has, because there was a time when she was writing 2 or 3 books at a time. So I know they're in a draft somewhere in the cloud, somewhere on Google Drive. But yeah.
That's great. Well, Marc, how can people get in touch with you?
The easiest way is if you go to, there's 2 ways. You can go to www.ritortofamilybooks.com, and you can go on the contact page and get me through there, or you can go to Ritorto Family Books on Facebook and send me a message there. My other social media is Instagram. That's Marc with a C _Ritorto, RITORTO. And I'm also on Twitter, which is Marc BJJ Fighter. Again, it's Marc with a C. So they can hit me up through those avenues. Go check out the website. I think it's very well designed. Designed it myself. You will see YouTube videos of us where we have done some podcast interviews. And I may have book trailers, but on our YouTube channel, we got book trailers on there. We also sell our books on there. You can only buy the hardcover versions of our books on our website, not through Barnes & Noble, Amazon. And if they're interested, I could autograph the Cabal for only $8, but you can only get that through my website, ritortofamilybooks.com. There's a link there. It says autograph book. Just click on it. And then we sell like t-shirts and hoodies based on the books that we've written. Well, the first 2. There's books in there, mugs and t-shirts and stuff.
Sounds exciting.
I'm the marketing guy in the family.
So Marc, are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
Yeah. Go ahead.
What is one thing everyone should do in their lifetime?
They should learn to play an instrument. And I say that because I started late guitar, and I was able to pick it up So the story, the idea that you can't treat an old dog new tricks is a fallacy. If you want to learn something, try it. Try something new. I think music helps, like with writers, writing helps them relax. Music helps you relax, and you can relate to it. And I think it's pretty fun to play a song that you grew up listening to.
What is one goal that has taken you the longest to complete?
The longest, and I haven't completed, would probably be obtaining the black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That I've been doing it for over 12 years, and I still haven't reached that level yet. Hopefully, if they release the COVID thing, lockdown here, because right now everything's locked down. We can't train. So I know when I go back, I'm gonna be very rusty. But yeah, that's my lifetime goal.
Very good lifetime goal. If someone handed you a pack of crayons and a coloring book, would you color?
Would I color or would I not color?
Would you color?
If I'm sitting down in a restaurant waiting for food, I would. Kills time. Yeah, I like to color, but I gotta have a place to sit, to draw whatever it is to draw. Yeah.
Well, Marc, thank you so much for stopping by. You all have been listening to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast.
Thank you so much.
I'm your host, Allison Nissen. Allison out. Marc Ritorto, a best-selling author, is the father of 4 daughters, including Kristina. He is a musician, writer, and a martial artist and a podcaster. He is the host of the Nick Martial Art podcast called The Mark the Shark MMA Show. He just started writing books for fun in 2018. His first self-published book, The Cabal, was just released on Amazon at the beginning of 2019. He recently finished his second book about a vampire, and he plans to write a sequel for the Cabal book series, along with spin-offs of the characters. For more information about Marc Ritorto, visit him at ritortofamilybooks.com. RITORTO familybooks.com. For more information about the Florida Writers Association, visit us on the web at floridawriters.com.